But there's just so much history I know or I feel OJ adjacent. Like, and so let me give you a little backstory. So when I was just breaking through into Hollywood, first of all, we all knew OJ. He was the most lovable guy. He was a legendary athlete before I met him, before I really knew who he was. But I knew who he was. I knew him more from Hertz, and he was that clean-cut guy. And I knew him from, all the airplane movies and guest stars and different things. And then when I moved to L.A., OJ had a big spot in Bel Air, and he had another spot on Rockingham or whatever. And you had just heard of it. You had heard of it, like the Century Club, OJ was there, or different places you had heard. Like if you went to the Playboy Mansion, which I wasn't going to yet, OJ was a fixture of the LA community. Now, this is before I popped off, so I had just heard his name at different restaurants. Not that I was trying to get a busboy job at. Like I was dead broke, right? We weren't in the same circles, we weren't in the same town. So OJ was a fixture of the community. And I know this because in my acting class, one of the guys was like a waiter or a bar back at Mezzaluna. And Mezzaluna was like the spot on the west side. If you could get just a job being a fucking bread runner, you were going to make $150 a day. Like Mezzaluna in the early 90s. And I had known this, and that's when you had heard, of the circles and stuff of the different people that went there. Now we know everybody, but at the time no one knew who Kris Kardashian was or Faye Resnick or all this stuff. So I just remember that was my history of OJ, like everyone else, and then Mezzaluna as a struggling actor. That was a spot. And you did hear that Mezzaluna was also a spot where people would pick up some drugs. I'm sorry to say that. You did hear that. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just saying that was, and I'm a broke actor, trying to be. I'm not an actor. I'm not like everyone. I'm a Dan Pouston. Dan, shout out Dan. Look up Dan Pouston. I'm where he was, but I wasn't as muscular and didn't have the mustache. But I was like a guy living in a fucking one room, and like I couldn't even get those jobs. Guys like Dan Pouston would get those jobs. So I was like this crazy open mic comic, taking some acting workshops. But I had worked and seen studies with different people that knew the certain restaurants that if you worked at, you could make $200 a day in the early 90s, and rent was only $500. So you worked a couple of weeks, you get your month's rent, and the rest of the time trying to grind for auditions. So at this time, so I go and, we wake up in the morning like everyone does in the history of OJ, and it's a fucking horrific scene, and the murder and the blood and the gore. It's like equivalent to Charles Manson. You know what I'm saying? It's 25 years since Helter Skelter. I just turned 24, and it was just horrific. Just horrific. And it was like, OJ, what the fuck? Everyone's like, OJ, no way, OJ. So it was wild, as you know. So at the time, I had just auditioned for SNL. I didn't get it. I had a deal at Universal that went nowhere. And I had a small holding deal with MTV. And the woman who was high up at MTV on the alternative comedy side by the name of Lisa Berger, shout out Lisa, I owe her a lot. At the time, you couldn't be everywhere. So at the time, she was kind of annoyed that I was on SNL, trying to get on SNL and trying to do a Universal deal. And I'm like, I just need to make money. But so she gave me a small lifeline of $15,000 to come up with a tape to do a show for MTV. And we used to have meetings at her house, and she's a LA native, and I don't want to say where her family lives, but they live in a very nice place, and she's an executive who eventually went on to become the president of E! She's the reason the Kardashians went on television, and at the time she was a young executive. And I went to Mark Cronin's wedding, I believe, and it was me, her, New York, and Daisy from Rock of Love. And we all had the best night hanging at Mark Cronin's wedding, drinking, doing shots, smoking cigars. Amazing night. That's another story. And so I believe that she went high up in MTV, got the job at E, became the president of E. And I want to say that she also had a huge job at either Oprah or Bravo, but she's a legend, right? And she believed in young talent. When I was there, she gave deals to like 4 people. Myself, Harlan Williams, Jim Brewer, Dave Chappelle. I'm pretty sure. Chappelle had deals all over town because everybody wanted him because he's a phenom. But we all were coming up in our own. But I believe those were, and I think Jay Moore. I think those 5 of us had deals. And she would go to the clubs and look for talent. Anyway, that's a lot of backstory to tell you about this because it's interesting, I thought. So I'm at her house. I have nothing going on. I just blew my SNL audition. I just blew my Universal. I had gotten a commercial advance, so I was going to make a little money there. And she's like, let's figure out this presentation pilot. And we're at her house going through ideas. I had ideas, and I was running it by her. She had a beautiful crib. And sure enough, she's like, oh my God, you seen this on TV? So the OJ stuff happened a few days ago, and now it's on the TV. It's the Bronco. It's a cultural seismic event. We are seeing it, and we're watching it. We're just like trying to go back, and oh my God, this is so weird. And okay, so in the first part of the series, here's how it'll be, and here's the characters, and oh my God, and then second, and we just kept going more and more to the TV. We're on CNN. I'll never forget it. It's this month, probably this week, and she's like, we got to stop. This is insane. It's just OJ going down the fucking freeway in the Bronco. And everyone's like, don't do it, Jews, and all this shit. And then the people, this was LA when you get on the bridges and people holding signs, and each time it was getting farther and farther. Then OJ's running, people were running out to see it. It was just mayhem. Well, after about an hour and change of watching this live chase live, and we're eating fucking chips and guacamole, we went full in on this thing. From development meeting to this, we started, woo, woo. She's like, oh my God, it's coming here. And we fucking, because she lives in a certain neighborhood, and we heard the fucking sirens and the whole caravan come by. And we're like, this is fucking crazy. This is crazy. And she's like, I can't believe he's going back to his house. And fucking sure enough, OJ and half of the LAPD and the California CHPs everywhere drove right by where we were and fucking went in, and OJ went and hugged his kid, or, forgot a fucking pair of shoes. I don't know. Came back out and they arrested him. It was that night. Where were you? I remember where I was. I was not far from that neighborhood, watching it on TV, trying to get my presentation pilot made for MTV. Yes, that's just the beginning. So everything goes down, and OJ becomes OJ, and that's the second part of his life. So I'm doing Scream 2, and Kevin Williamson, obviously brilliant writer, writes so many things so well. You never really, he's one of the few people you really don't have to improvise with, because his stuff is just so, if something happens on page 3, it's going to tie together on page 89. Like, that's who he is. He's a true, amazing savant. And, when I have these rants, I always make sure that I get in all of the facts and everything and the nuance and the times. But I'm like, always would tell Wes, I'm like, can I just try one? Just to see, so you have it. I'm a big believer of having it. And Wes was like cool like that. He was like, yeah, he's like, if you want to try it, go for it. Like, he knew, like, I think working with us and later in life, and he came more chill. And I think that, maybe he always was, but I feel like he had all these young up and coming stars with him, and we were so vivacious to do these things. And Kevin was too, but he was like doing a million things. And so, like, I would say, can I try this a different way? And he's like, go for it. He's like, I'll just run the camera and you can do your thing. So I'm doing my death scene before my death scene. And you want to be one of the big boys, huh? Manson, Bundy. And I think there's a third name. It was someone else. And I just went, OJ, because I knew that would get a laugh. It was hot. It was 4 years after all this shit, or 3 years. It was still in the zeitgeist. It was in the zeitgeist forever. And I thought that would be good. So I do it. They cut. Wes laughs. He's like, that's a good choice. That's a good, whatever. So we end up, when the movie comes out, that was an alternative take. And I was fucking The Man's Chinese, biggest premiere of my life up until that date. And it was just insane. And it says Manson, Bundy, OJ. Huge laughs at Man's Chinese. Over 1,000 people, all industry. Everyone's there. Half the cast of Friends. I think Christina Ricci was there. Just a billion people were there. Like every name. Quentin Tarantino. Like it was just nuts. And I'm like, score, my dad. And then I got killed. And my dad goes, you did? And I go, yeah. And he goes, not coming back? And I go, no. He goes, I'm going to go have a cigarette. So literally, as soon as I die, my dad ran out to fucking smoke a fucking grit. And I just was sitting with my family. It was a beautiful moment of like, my mom was like, this is gory, but boy. And I just got mad reaction because people were discovering who Jamie Kennedy was. And I was discovering who he was. And I was like, I'm like, this is a fucking moment. Get your fucking joke in. Learn what a joke is. Because I didn't know, but like being at the store and the improv and the ice house and going up there and improving and seeing people when they fuck with the audience, that was a skill that I had learned from being on stage. And I'm like, try something in the moment. Robin Williams was always like, say it until the camera stops. They at least have it. So they kept it. It worked. It killed. It got a lot of love. Cut to, I'm, popping around doing a billion things at this time. And someone said they went to Westwood and saw Scream 2 and OJ was there. Oh, I don't know if I can say this. I don't know if it's true, but they said he was there with his kids and the joke came on and the audience laughed and OJ was just like, and I mean, there's a lot to this. So it's like, I can't, what I can say. I can say a lot to it. But I was like, oh, fuck. Like, I feel bad for his kids, man. I feel so bad for his kids. I felt terrible for his kids. So part of me was like, OJ, do something horrific. These are the jokes. Jamie, you shouldn't have fucking did the joke because he's got kids. Now, quite frankly, I don't think his kids were old enough to go to Scream 2, so then I felt a little bit better. I'm like, he shouldn't have took his kids to Westwood anyway to see a horror slasher sequel. So I don't know if it's true. I was told that by somebody. And it was more like I felt bad for the kids, weirded out. It's just so many mixed emotions with the whole thing, right? This is going to be longer than I thought. So, whatever. That's it. It's done. I go on my life. Everyone goes on their life.